Why problem make when you no problem have, you don't want to make?
I'm in Max. You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 28, Episode 2 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Happy.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Kurt.
Well, hello, Kate and Kurt. How are you?
Great.
Doing well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, commingle you, but I just did.
I mean, we are commingled, so
There you go.
that's fine.
Yeah.
In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Jonas writes in about finding his online gaming groove. Dave from DC writes in about flashbacks, and Tappy has an idea for a pendulum swinging with regards to role-playing games, and that excites me very much. And also, we're going to talk about the Lighthearted Kickstarter, which is going to be starting very soon, isn't it? Is it live?
In fact, it'll be going live on the 26th, so on Tuesday at 9 a.m. PST.
Excellent.
So soon.
And they would go to what URL for that?
They would go to lighthearted.games.
Lighthearted.
Lighthearted, all one word, .games with an S.
Excellent. And that's
I'll put it in the chat.
Hearted, Hearted, not Harded, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Lighthearted.
Lighthearted.
L-I-G-H-T.
It's just lighthearted.
Sorry. But if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We're on the social meteors, happyjacksrpg, all one word, on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and MeWe. And also, if you'd like to watch the show live, we do it at 7 p.m. Pacific time at happyjacks.org/live. happyjacks.org/live. 7 p.m. Pacific time. So what's your elevator pitch for the Lighthearted RPG? Now you're running. We should mention you are running an actual play on our actual play feed.
I've been running an actual play of Lighthearted on the Happy Jacks Twitch channel for a little over 6 months. We're coming up on episode 15, which is should be our big finale. Mm-hmm. We'll see. It's shaping up to be exciting, as the players sent me messages that they were changing their whole plan 2 days before the game day. So fun.
Like all good players.
So who knows what's going to happen? It'll be fun. The elevator pitch for Lighthearted. Or do you want to take this one, or should I?
No, you go for it.
Okay. The elevator pitch for Lighthearted is that it's a magical 80s RPG. You play out the coming-of-age stories of 80s movies and TV as a prep, jock, geek, rebel, or outcast, except you're just about to start Magic Community College. So it's like a mashup of The Breakfast Club and The Magicians.
Cool.
It's St. Elco's Fireball.
Yeah, it's St. Elmo's Fireball.
Excellent. And Lighthearted.
One of my favorite concepts somebody ever had was a correspondence mage, but not correspondence magic. Like you wrote in to correspondence class.
Yeah, I went to Wizard College.
Back when correspondence classes were a thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the witch in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where she learned all her magic through correspondence course.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how Harry Dresden learned Latin. If you ever read the Harry Dresden books.
Yeah.
He said, God damn it.
I got my degree at the University of Phoenix Sorcery.
The College of Sorcery at the University of Phoenix.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I bet you $1 American that exists.
You know what? They might have one at the Universal Life Church. And for a self-addressed stamped envelope, you can probably get a diploma from there.
Yep.
I got what do you call it? Ordained from there, because I couldn't find my ordination card. Because I'd had it since the 90s.
I had to marry someone recently because, pandemic going on. So they were like, well, we're just going to do it just us because we want this date. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go to their house and we all stayed safe and stuff. But I had to marry someone recently, and it had been 12 years since I used my ordination from the American Marriage Ministries.
See, I only performed one wedding, and that marriage lasted 3 months. And I figured, nope, I'm cursed. I'm not doing any more weddings, and I have not done one since. I've been asked a couple times, and I'm like, are you sure you want me to do that? Because the last wedding I officiated lasted 3 months.
What if you actually don't like them?
Well, usually people who don't like me don't ask me to marry them.
No.
Except for 2 wives.
You.
What?
They might like you, but you don't like them.
This'll learn them.
That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen that often. That doesn't happen very much. I would find it very difficult to not like someone who likes me. It's just.
You're going to say it's very difficult for someone to like you if you don't like them.
Well, yes. That's true. Absolutely. Who would like to read? Who would like to read the first email? Finding online gaming groove. Or should I read it?
It shouldn't be me because I don't have it up.
Okay.
Oh.
Should I read it?
I can read it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
All right. Finding the online gaming groove. I would like to dedicate this letter to my friend and longtime listener Andreas that unfortunately has left us. It's hard to write about. He was so content before the end, and had just won a couple of dice from one of your Rainbow Railroad drives. Dice that had been touched by Stork. Andreas passed away just a couple of hours after he had made skin contact with them. He got mauled by a bear that he had read about in the newspaper, leaving behind his wife, 2 children, and 3 RPG characters he liked to tell me about. I should have done something, Andreas. Sorry for being a bad friend.
I got to say, when I first read this email, I just skimmed through it. I'm like, oh my God, Andreas died? Holy shit, this is awful.
Yeah.
I didn't read the second and third paragraph.
When I first read this, because I read it earlier, I also had the same reaction, like, oh my God, what is this guy? And then I was like, oh, okay.
I read, when I got to, mauled by a bear, I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible people get mauled by a bear all the time, but usually it doesn't have anything to do with Stork.
No.
Unless Stork is now a bear trainer since the pandemic started, which is not impossible.
You never know. I mean, people are taking up all kinds of weird hobbies right now. So
He's got a big backyard. He could start a drive-through zoo.
Yeah.
Like the Tiger King or whatever his name was.
Yeah, he'd be Bearzar.
And talking about being bad at stuff, I need help being a better RPG player online. I'm mostly a GM and wrote a letter to you a couple of years back on how better transit to other side of the table. How to better whatever. Anyway, you know what I mean. I got some nice, the word is spelled wrong. I got some nice pointers, like don't have a cow man from Tappy, and helped me ease into the player seat. But I once again feel lost in the new world of online play. My problem is twofold. I find it hard to step into my character's shoes and struggle to read the rest of the room. This leads to that I mostly sit quiet through the whole session, slowly turning back into the shy, dire wallflower from my youth. So, what can I do to become a better player? How can I make the experience better for myself and the other players and the GM? I will probably come with practice, but I wouldn't mind some insight from the pros. Johannes Larson in morning.
Or afternoon.
Yeah.
So I have a tip real fast, and that is make sidebars. Like, start messaging people, because that will create opportunities for your player to do things. So while other people who might be more outgoing are talking to the GM, you can ask questions, or I'm going to do a little thing, or I'm going to go talk with this person, and just do little sidebars, because those will create opportunities later on. Those will pay dividends. Maybe not even that session, but especially if your GM is really good, later on, those things, maybe not even consequences, but it will open the door for you to play more. In my ancient Traveler game that happened a lot with Bill and Shing and Jessica too, where somebody would be talking a lot because a couple of the players are just very gregarious, so while a lot of talking was going on, they would just quietly be doing stuff or asking questions or figuring stuff out with me, and it kept them engaged in the game if they weren't just laughing their heads off on what other people were saying. And it's one of the reasons why I love playing online as opposed to playing in a room, because you can do that.
Oh, you're talking about because people can have sidebars like through a chat or something without having to interrupt anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also, I really believe that secrets are better when nobody knows that a secret is being kept, because that really changes how
I agree.
How people play, and like what was it? I was recently like researching a whole bunch of stuff on bias, because once a player gets an idea in their head, they will latch onto that like a fucking lamprey.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have these sidebars, you can have other ideas and other things happening that don't necessarily influence, like, subconsciously what the other players are doing, right? So I think that I just love it. I really enjoy that. And as somebody super ADHD, I will forget an idea that I had within 5 minutes. So if somebody is talking and talking and talking, I can like write something to the GM and start like having something happen relatively quickly, as opposed to suddenly like just thinking about the Battle of Tsushima or something like that, because that happens.
Right.
And I super agree with that, because when you're at the table, if you write a note and you pass it to the GM, everyone sees that happen. And it's hard to put it out of your head and not metagame or not, hold that in your mind and go, oh, that person just passed a note. What does it say? They're doing something secretive. They're doing, they're up to something. I'm going to be suspicious of that character that's in our group because they've been passing notes to the GM, so obviously they're pulling some, it's hard not to do that, not to have that bias, right?
Oh, sure.
Even though, even the best players who try not to do that, like, you still have that in the back of your head. It's still influencing some of your actions or that trust for that fellow player or whatever. Like, it's still going to influence your play, right? But online, you can just send those private messages to your GM and maybe be a little nefarious, or maybe have your own investigation going on or whatever, and the other players don't know, and so it's not affecting the trust of the team or the your biases or whatever, because no one knows you're passing notes.
I believe it's called anchoring is the concept, like the specific type of bias. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like if you think that like in the first session, if you get an idea that this character can't be trusted, you're not even considering that it's a bias, or like the player can be trusted, but like this character is doing like a thing, so I will never trust that character. I will never do anything along with that character. I will always fight that character, and it can be a problem. And even positive ones too, like you get it in your head that this person helps you or something, and then you get that anchoring on the other side. And as a GM, you can use that, but as players, especially if you're trying to create opportunities for yourself and ones that might be surprising or interesting for the other characters, not necessarily stabbing them in the back, but like having the thing happen. Like Shing, her character had no idea, and she had no idea that Bill was murdering people who were like either threatening her or looking like they were going to do something to her or whatever. He would just like, pat her on the head, let her go, and then like slowly cut somebody's throat. And literally nobody in the party knew that was happening. And he had, because he was like a mob boss, he had all this extra information, but he wasn't like sharing that with everybody because he's a mob boss, and he's a retired mob boss, and like that has a whole lot of complications with everybody in the party. But but I gave him all this extra information. He kept on asking me via messengers, like, okay, I'm going to send a email or whatever it is in Traveler to this person. It's going to like oh, what the hell do they? a courier. Like a courier with this message to go somewhere else to reach somebody. So like months later, all of these like things he was doing in Sidebar started paying dividends, and things started happening for the characters that allowed them to do like these huge world-ending things. But all of that was just Bill having ideas, and while other people were doing stuff, just opening all of these doors for him.
Right. I mean, I don't know where his lack of participation comes from. If it's coming, is it coming from shyness? He says he's a dire wallflower. Mm-hmm. Is that like a dire wolf?
That's a giant wallflower with teeth.
I mean, and it could be because they're playing online. He may not know the people he's playing with, because a lot of people clam up when they're around people they don't know. But I mean, the other thing he could do, if he wants to just be more of a present player as far as being involved in what's going on, he should maybe set himself some sort of a goal, like say every hour I'm going to make some kind of a suggestion, whether it's stupid or smart, whatever comes to my mind, I'm going to do this thing, and just set yourself some kind of a goal to do something. And maybe it is even more to bring other players in, or to include yourself in what other players are doing. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to go off and do this thing, but it can be, if depending on the role of the character, maybe he's the muscle in the party. You can say, oh, well, so and so is going to go talk to someone. Well, I'm going to go out and go with them. I'm just going to make sure everything goes fine, and just make an effort to it. Even if you're not being super proactive, make an effort to make sure you're always on the scene whenever things are happening, because if you're hanging back, of course, that's when you miss out. That's when, like, when someone says, "Oh, I'm going to go over to this place," and the GM has decided, "Oh, that's the place where the ambush is." Well, no one went with them. So and so's getting ambushed, and everyone else at the table is like, "Can I be there?" You know what I mean? But be the guy who's always there, who's always got the other players back.
Yeah.
My other suggestion would be, you asked, how can I make the experience better for myself and the other players and the GM? I've had the conversation with people about making space at the table for people. And maybe it's a conversation you could have with your group about you not feeling comfortable or being shy, and so you don't know how to make space for yourself. And so then maybe your friends that you're playing with, obviously they're your friends or you wouldn't be playing with them, can help you with that. And so when they're going and doing stuff, they can say like, hey, whatever your character's name is, come with me. And so then it's not you always having to insert yourself, but it's them remembering to bring you along as well. So if you tell them you're struggling to remember to do things, then maybe they'll remember to drag you along with them. Mm-hmm. And have that conversation with your friends. Like, hey, I'm struggling. Could you guys remember to make space for me at the table? In small things like saying, hey, drag me along to the adventure. By saying like, hey, Bilbo, let's go find the ring. Whatever,
That's an awesome idea. Like, that reminded me when you were talking about, did you guys do Vampirelarps at all? So doing Vampirelarps is basically you're playing an NPC for the GM's friends. Is how this works. It really is, because the GM has a story that is for his or their friends, and then you have 20 or 30 other people who don't even know the story, just kind of doing their thing, right? So what ended up happening is I would play with my friend Jessica, and Jessica's been one of my best friends for like 20 years. She also happens to be a stunning redhead model, and so I would just hang out with her. And then the GM or the GM's friends wanted to include her in the story. And then I got included in the story because I was always next to her and we had like a connection with our characters. So build a connection, like even like when you're making characters, like whoever is the most gregarious person, just be like, hey, I'm your bodyguard, or I'm your little brother. or I'm your dad, right? And create these intrinsic kind of things, because that will make it so that you always have a connection with this person who is always doing things. Because, like, Jessica didn't really have a choice. She was always getting roped into everything. Like, things were just happening to her.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is a great idea.
I think that's the way to go. I mean, I don't know what game you're playing. I don't think you specified which games you're playing, but I mean, things like Dungeon World started doing this. A lot of games have ties and connections and bonds that you form with the other characters. And just by pointing at the most, boisterous player and saying, I'm your character's whatever, or I'm going to do this for your character, and then now you have a reason and a way to cheat yourself into that scene because you have a motivation now. Mm-hmm. I'm also a little more story game bullshit writer's room play style, so I tend to go the flip side of the secrets are secret, and I just say, hey, I would think it's really cool if my character gets to do this in this campaign. Who wants to help me get to that point? And then we'll just talk it out from a really high level of, hey, let's make this happen with our characters. Or wouldn't it be neat if our characters ended up together in the end? And then now you know that that's the goal, and you play with that the whole time.
We played a game where I tend to be a very active player in games. And we have a friend who tends to be the shy guy who sits in the corner. And he just made the declaration that his character was my familiar. And he just made that declaration, that he is a crow and that he is my familiar. And I went, you are? Oh, okay. That's great. I've always wanted a familiar. I didn't realize I get a familiar. That's amazing. And so the whole game, he was my familiar. And he played and was so much more active in that game because he just, at the very beginning of the game, we all made characters, but he didn't tell me while he was making his character that was going to happen. But first scene, first game, character introductions, he said, I'm your familiar. I was like, that's amazing. And then the rest of that campaign was so much fun and so amazing, and he was very active because I was constantly going, oh my gosh, where is he? He needs to be with me because he's my familiar. Because we needed to be doing things.
Now, was his character a crow before he declared that his character was your familiar?
So this was from a Dungeon World game, and there is a familiar playbook that we found when we were all doing characters. He goes, "Don't tell anyone." I was like, "Okay, you can play the familiar." And he just showed up. He didn't tell me who he was going to try to be their familiar. I thought he was just going to be an abandoned familiar.
That's so sad. Awesome. It's like an abandoned teddy bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, he just declared that he was mine, and it was great. Because he was so much more active.
And Apocalypse World does that with the Skinner. Is this person is your lover, right? And that is a thing now that exists, that is happening.
Yep.
If you think about it, it's kind of brilliant to have players play familiars, because familiars are the ones that, it depends on who's playing in the table, but a lot of times they're the ones that go into the really dangerous shit. It's like, well, we don't want to go in there. What's in your familiar?
The player's like, I'm not going in there.
He would go off and just steal things and come back and be like, well, you said you needed more components. And I was like, I meant buy them. I didn't mean run off and go steal them. And he would hear me say things, and then he would just take
solve
off.
problems.
He would just solve problems. And it was amazing.
Where did you even find a capybara?
It was honestly one of the most fun games we've played because he played my familiar and he would just decide, oh, she has a problem, I'm going to solve it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it was not in the ways you would expect.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
If you got a problem, I'll solve it.
All right. Thank you, Jonas Larson, and condolences for the loss of Andreas.
Yes.
Yes.
Very tragic. I think I read something about the bear attack. Do you have bears there? They have bears there? I think they probably got bears there, don't they? They have bears everywhere.
Where?
Well, they're in the Scandinavian countries.
Oh, it just says they're in mourning. I don't know where that is.
Heyo. I think they're like they're from.
I'm sure
Sweden
there are
or
bears.
Norway or Denmark. One of those places.
Brown bears.
California,
Okay.
so.
Yeah. So you know what the different? Because brown bears and black bears can both be brown and black.
Of course.
You know how to tell the difference between a brown and a black bear? I'm sure you do, Stu.
How?
You climb a tree, and if it climbs up after you, it's a black bear. If it knocks it down, it's a brown bear. That's how you do it. So in Scandinavia, they don't have many trees, obviously, because they keep on checking to see if the black bear, which doesn't exist.
But they do have
in
trolls.
Scandinavians.
It didn't play. Damn it. Oh well. I was going to play my white problem make. Flashbacks from Dave in DC. Does someone read this, or should I read it?
I can read it if you want.
All right.
All right. Flashbacks from Dave in DC. Dear Stu and the rest of the crew, Dave from DC here again. I just listened to season 27, episode
Something.
and wanted to address two of the topics discussed: flashbacks and pacing. While I have never is there a word missing there?
Probably
While I
never
have
played.
never seen a game system which had specific flashback mechanics in it, nor have I used flashbacks for deep character backstory or retconning, I have used a flashback in one of my convention games to help set the pacing of the game. Again, I used Savage Worlds to run Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. convention games. The event description for the game stated: Intel comes from the location of the secret Hydra base, where it is believed that their scientists are conducting experiments with the shards of a destroyed cosmic cube. Needless to say, anyone in possession of even fragments of the cosmic cube represents a threat to the security of the entire planet. The Avengers are being sent in with S.H.I.E.L.D. support to destroy the base and contain any amount of cosmic cube material found. However, S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Maria Hill has a special mission for your team. While the main assault is happening, your team is to redacted level 10 authorization required. So, the players signing up knew they were playing S.H.I.E.L.D. agents on a special mission and that an assault on a Hydra base would be happening. But they might or might not be directly involved. When the players got to the table, they chose characters. The character sheets were... This is long, Jesus.
Oh, yeah. You can split it up if you want to.
That's okay. Shit, I lost my place. They chose characters. The character sheets were clear that they were members of a tactical team with specific roles such as team leader, medic, computer specialist, field interrogator, etc. But again, the character sheets did not give any clue as to the mission. After I did a quick review of the basics rules of Savage Worlds, bennies, wild dice, and cards for initiative, for those who had never played before, I started them immediately in media res. I described to them that they were a fully equipped tactical team sitting in the back of a Quinjet, which was lit in a red light to preserve their night vision. They could see past the pilot and co-pilot out the front canopy, that they were jetting through the night sky, and that there was a crew member at the electric warfare station ensuring that they were undetected. Affixed to the front of the GM screen was a sign which had the word "Now" printed in bold Comic Sans letter font. Since the game was based on comics, this was the only proper use of this font, in my opinion. Nice. I hadn't pointed it out, but it was clearly visible to all players. Then I had the NPC crew chief in the back of the jet address the characters, telling them, "Stand up and hook up. We are 5 minutes from the drop zone." At that point, I flipped the sign over, and the other side, which read "then." Again, appropriately in bold Comic Sans font. As the scene continued, with the characters receiving their secret mission briefing back on the shield.
Oh, that's so fun! What a neat idea. So they're like all super confused and shit at first. Got it. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's really cool. Now is like telling you this is happening, and then they flip it, and now we have context. That's a good way to do that. The players then got the information they needed and could do some planning. To be fair, insert appropriate Letterkenny inspiration inspired repetition.
To be fair.
It was a convention game, so it was already going to be fast-paced enough to fit in a 4-hour game block. However, the initial media res scene was with the flashback to receive the actual briefing impressed upon the players that at a point in the not-too-distant future, their characters were parachuting out of the back of a jet in the middle of the night to assault an objective. As a result, despite giving the players ample real time to be briefed, plan, and equip themselves, the initial scene impressed upon them the need for expediency, and the experienced players planning, and the players dealt with their planning and equipping in a fairly quick manner. It is my experience players planning for a heist or mission can often take forever, often wasting entire game sessions on it. The fact that the planning was happening in a flashback and the players knew that when the game time returned to the present, they were jumping out of an airplane in the middle of the night really focused them.
That's awesome.
Then the now/then storytelling mechanic is used frequently in comics to show flashbacks, so it worked well in my comic-based game. Anyway, that is my experience with using a flashback in-game. While it didn't do a deep character development, I think it worked well to impress on the players that the mission in the scenario was one where time was of the essence, and they needed to keep pressing forward. Keep up the great content, grab yourselves a puppers, and have a drink. David from DC. Thanks, Dave.
That's such a that Letterkenny reference.
Letterkenny beers.
That's the beer they drink.
I'd have a puppers.
Gus and Brew. I'd have a beer. I'd have a dart. McNally's a piece of shit.
I love flashbacks. I think they're great. I've played a bunch of Blades, which has a flashback mechanic built in. So I especially like the way that they built it into the genre by using the now then in the font on the front of their GM screen.
Oh yeah.
Like to make it feel in fiction even that this was like this is the movie we're building, and then bam, we bounce back.
Yeah, that was very smart.
Yeah, I'm totally going to steal this idea the next time we have a game convention. That's such a good idea.
It's awesome. I don't think I'll ever use it because I don't have a story when any game ever begins. My story is always let the players do things, and then that will lead you to where the story goes.
Right.
And so I think this type of mechanic is great for establishing like a beginning or lore or whatever for like when you have a story in hand. Yeah, it also sounds like a lot of work.
I don't know if it would be that much. You're just
like,
going to have extremely confused players for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game, and then you have the flashback, and then they're like, oh, and now they have a little bit of context of what it is they're planning too.
True.
Mm-hmm. I've had some great experiences with flashbacks in games. The first time I played Blades in the Dark at a con. So Blades in the Dark it's a like sort of gothic horror, gothic Dark Souls type of vibe, but you are criminals doing heists and things like that. The whole premise of the game is that you're going to go do a bunch of heists. And so it needs a flashback mechanic so that you can Ocean's 11 it, right? And you can just get there and you don't spend 3 sessions planning and then it doesn't work anyways because it all just goes out the window the second you get into the place or the vault or whatever. So it has a mechanic where you can just say, I'm going to spend some stress, I'm going to introduce a scene, or I'm going to say, oh, well, now here's where I tell you that we actually met with this gang and arranged for them to show up to help us here. So we're actually not outnumbered. We planned for this. And then you go back and you do the scene and see if it works, right? See if you're able to, or maybe they screwed you after all or whatever. The way it worked out in the con game that I played is we all sat down to get it was like the default adventure that you're supposed to get where you open up and the guy is like, here's your trunk and I need you to deliver it to this place. and you're supposed to just negotiate for money and then go do the job. And halfway through, we were like, this guy's kind of a douche. I don't think we actually work for this guy. I think we're going to flash back to where we planned to rob this guy. And the whole game changed, and now we're here to rob him, and the taking of his job is just a ruse to get into his base. It was a great game, and it all happened because of that mechanic that let us just change our whole plan.
That's awesome. That's a brilliant.
I could see, not that I need to plug Lighthearted, but I could see using our montage mechanic in Lighthearted as a flashback mechanic. Because there's a mechanic in Lighthearted where you have the players do a montage scene where they just say like little bits of information about what they did. And I could see doing that, like where you get into a thing where they're like, oh wait, we wanted to have prepped for this. And you could say like, okay, well, let's do that in a montage. How did you guys prep for this? And so I could see using a montage as a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the A-Team, like the montage is like the A-Team when they're going to be building something. They have,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when
like,
somebody
how
gets
did you-
really good at something in an 80s movie, like you can't
Yeah.
quite get it all.
Yeah. Hold on, let me just learn Kung Fu real fast.
Exactly.
Oh, I
so
can
we have a-
I
we
can
have a
turn this into
mechanic like
Camaro.
that where it's like everybody adds something to the scene, and all the characters add something to the scene, so we call it a montage. And so you can see using that as a flashback.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you all in on a little secret, because so Dave from DC, I didn't steal this. I'm already planning on opening up in media res on our last one and giving all the characters a way to do flashbacks so that
good.
they can plan.
Yeah. I think you may have done a flashback with a montage before in a game I've played with you. I think that's why I'm thinking, like, haven't we done that before?
Well, I mean, okay, so now we're talking about Lighthearted. Shut me up if you need to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the game is structured with film language. So like all of the scene types are scene types. Like it's a wide shot or a close up or an over the shoulder, or like everything is all built into that. And the way that you run those scenes depends on where the camera is, right? And so having a montage in that, it makes sense because it's like, oh, well, we're building a TV show. This is the moment when we would have a montage to do the research because, nobody wants to just listen to me give you information. Let's show what it looks like when your characters are in the library. And, it's that moment in Buffy when they just do a quick, everybody's in the library opening books real fast for like 3 minutes. And then suddenly they know how to kill the monster.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Dave, in DC. I'm stealing that idea.
Yeah.
I'm
Really
totally
good
going to steal
idea.
that. Now,
as Kurt was reading it, all of us were like, oh, yeah. That's
Been taking notes.
Totally future GMing.
I think it really will help with pacing too, because it sets that tone of like, shit, we're in some trouble. We got to get going, even though now we're back at the base. And
Need I remind you, 5 minutes ago, we were jumping out of an airplane. Let's figure this out.
Let's not spend 3 hours of the game planning for it.
Yeah.
And that can happen, especially at con games with heists. I mean, Kurt Hanna ran a heist game, and he set a time limit for the players. He said, at this point, your in-game time is up because the heist has to happen because whatever it is you're going to get is going to move or leave. So he set up a time. It's like you have X amount of time to plan. Yep. So I think that would absolutely increase the urgency of it if you did it as a flashback.
I have never, ever once had people plan when I ran a heist game. They just find out where it is and they just go. And I'm like, fuck.
Even in
That's how I play
Shadowrun?
Yes, and I ran a Shadowrun game on the stream and they did that. And I'm like, God, I can't. I mean, I could just kill all of you right now and have you choose. I brought like 20 characters, but...
That sounds like when our heists in Shadowrun turn into Battle of the Bands.
Yeah. Listen,
Which happened more than once.
If Shadowrun didn't want you to just run in the front door, why do they sell rocket launchers?
Because they're a thing called spiders.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right. Now, Tappy, you had a concept for the way the pendulum in gaming may swing back a different direction.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily how it may swing back, but I especially love that I get to talk to all of you about this because it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. But in the last like 10 years, especially the last like 5 years, I think, I mean, games have really swung towards we are telling a story. We're sitting around and telling each other a story, as well as improv is awesome. We love improv. I love improv. You guys love improv. We're all like theater kids doing improv and like being silly and having a great time. And in fact, like we here on the show, when people talk about like people beginning, it's like, oh, my son is just beginning, and you know he started being in character more. We're all like, yay, in character. And that's great and fun, but we've gone so far over to that side to where there's almost no game anymore in lots of RPGs. And like if you look at Modifius or whichever,
Yeah.
the 2D20,
Modifius.
you start with Conan, which is a relatively crunchy game. They have this really cool momentum system, and there's a lot of things to do. But as development goes with other games, you start getting to, I think it's John Carter of Mars, where you don't really even have skills anymore, and you don't have like the skill trees per se that you would have for your character in Conan, which is more like a game character. Now you just have these rough shells for telling the story of your character. And then even so far to Star Trek, where you're good at everything, and that fits the genre, but you have like a few little traits that are like kind of sort of special things you can do, and the rest of it is incredibly nebulous, so the game system gets out of the way for your improv and for your storytelling. But the thing is, there are people who like games. And we talk about this with D&D, like D&D has not gone away from a game. They've made a better board game than they've had in the past. A board game a lot of people find fun, but like there is space for people in the RPG hobby who don't like to talk in character.
Mm-hmm.
And even more so, like there are people who might like to talk in character but aren't good at it, especially if like I always play like the big bruiser. I want to be like a vamp character. Well, that's really hard for a lot of people, and so having to be in character, and in Apocalypse World, they have a thing of to do it. Like you don't say I'm using this mechanic, you just start talking, and then the mechanic follows that. And so I think it'd be really interesting because really like more and more as more of that game goes by the board, especially the people who really love storytelling and being in character, kind of pushes it even further away. So I'm going to try and run a game where there is no talking in character, or as little as possible. There is no, like, being in character is choosing what your character does, not necessarily like improving a scene with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's fun, and I think that's fun too. But what is it like when you don't do that? How many more things do you get done? How does that open up character selection for people? Is it fun? I don't fucking know. I've never played that game before. But I first had this idea when do you guys know Weird Miniatures and Malifaux? You guys ever play that?
Yeah.
So they in like 2012 they're looking for an intern to start working on their role-playing system. And I really liked their game system. So I was like, I want to do this. So I started putting together a game that was for people who are tabletop wargamers and not role players. And the idea was that scenes would be like playing a game of poker, modified poker, like a Texas Hold'em kind of thing. And then that would inform what you could do in the scene, etc. I ended up not doing it because I had the worst interview ever. But this is kind kind of been in the back of my head for a while. And so I'm going to try and use Fate to do this, because that's a system that gets in the way of role-playing a lot, and it's a game system you can be good at. I don't know if it's going to be game-y enough to be fun, because if all you're doing is playing a game and that game isn't fun, then it's going to be a bust. But like, what do you guys think about it? Do you think that it's possible to have a system, or would you like a system where you didn't have to do that? Or obviously, if you only want to tell a story, etc., that system would get in the way of you. But can that swing? Do you think that pendulum can or should swing back? And what do you think about a game where you don't talk in character?
I mean, I think a lot of people already play this way. The OSR community is probably a big, a place where a lot of people play this way, right? They play the old school D&D style where we're going out and we're finding treasure and we're solving puzzles and we're defeating the big bad or whatever. But we're not going to talk about it. Like, we're not going to argue with the bartender. We're just going to get it done, right? Or you're going to tell me, and I, as the player, are going to solve your puzzle that you presented to me with my person. And I think that's a current play style that is pretty big in the OSR. I'm saying I agree with you. I think there's definitely room for it in the hobby.
That's something that I didn't say because I forgot to, is OSR does something different than what I am interested in, because OSR specifically is player knowledge over character knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so having a game where you can make the decisions for your character, but again, you're not necessarily you're not tapping everything with a 10-foot pole. It would be like your character would automatically do that because of skills you have, etc., like that. But it's kind of like that. But OSR is also very rules light.
Yeah.
And the point of that is kind of, I've always seen as more like an escape room is OSR, right? And I'm like, can we play a game that will actually be fun? Or can we get more game into the system without getting rid of those opportunities to roleplay?
Have you looked at Lancer at all?
Negative.
Okay, so Lancer started out, I believe it started out as a 4th edition, it was going to be a 4th edition hack or whatever, of 4th edition D&D. It took a lot of the really good juicy bits out of 4th edition D&D, and then it took some of the lighter stuff that came out after that, and it sort of bolted it together. You ended up with a pretty complex combat system for when you're in it's a mech game. Made by Abaddon, the person who does Kill 6 Billion Demons. The art is beautiful. And so when you're in your mechs, you're in this really complex combat system. And when you're out of your mechs and doing being a jockey and talking to people on the starbase or whatever, you have this slimmed down version of the game that has some Fate-like aspect type things that give you bonuses to rolls. You have a simpler system that you're rolling with to sort of promote or to make it easier to do the sort of narrative play that can happen. But you could totally play that game in, I think someone said it in chat, in pawn mode, I think is what they call it, where you are not embodying your character, but you are driving their actions. So you could totally play that game in that method, with that method, and I think it would work great. Because it's actually a really good gamey game, for what you're talking about, where the game itself is fun and the mechanics are interesting. That is the one that I would hold up as last year's best game, mechanics heavy game.
And it's on itch.io.
Yeah.
So is that a trend that's beginning to happen?
So Pathfinder 2 came out, which is a pretty gamey game. And does some really neat things with mechanics where you are really looking at how many actions, it has, instead of deciding if you have major actions and minor actions and stuff, you just have 3 action points, kind of like how a lot of those tabletop or the you have 3 AP or whatever, and you can spend them to move your character or do a thing. That's how Pathfinder does it. I think we're seeing more of those types of games. Like Pathfinder's doing it. Lancer did it pretty well, where you have some like pretty mechanics heavy combat stuff going on while you're in the mechs. I haven't seen a bunch of other big success stories for like more gamey games, but I definitely think there could be.
Savage Worlds is putting out a Pathfinder game.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a game doesn't have to have a lot of mechanics in order to be fun, because like chess is relatively, like, the rules of it are relatively simple, or like Hold'em is relatively simple, but there's a lot of choices and stuff.
Fucking Go. Jesus. That's a hard-ass game, and it's the simplest as ever.
And it would be really neat to start seeing more games go that way and people creating more games like that, because otherwise we're just beginning to just get settings. And so, like, one of the things that I love about what you guys are doing when you're, like, looking at these things, like where the camera is or where, like, what the shot is, framing what is happening, that informs people of what is happening and gives a different game. But, like, if I'm looking at these 2D20 games, like, I can't really talk much about the Dune game because they will sue me. But, like, there's a progression that's happening with that company, and it's a progression that it's kind of a bummer, I think. Just because they're kind of like how sidebars can inform what you're doing and open opportunities, etc. Systems can do that as well. They don't have to just get in the way of things. And yeah, boy, I'm actually going to do this in Fate using a slight modification of the Dresden file system, because that game got so much in the way of role-playing that I'm really excited to see what happens with that game if you don't have to worry about it. Because that might be fun. It might not. It might still be frustrating and just light it on fire. I don't know.
I'm actually interested to go take another stab at Fate. This is the flip side of why you want to look at it. Now that I've played and run a bunch of PBTA games, and I understand what Fiction First is meant to be like at a table, I think Fate might actually be interesting if you try to forget it exists while you're playing it.
See, I think
just let the bump into the rules instead of trying to game it, like the whole +2 fishing thing that would happen with, we got to build up our aspects so we can defeat the boss. Like, if you just try to forget the game exists, and then you're like, oh, but I do this cool thing. Why isn't there a mechanic for that? And you're like, well, there is. I just write it on a note card, and that's an aspect now, and you get +2 if you use it. Like, that sounds really good, but players like to use the mechanics to win sometimes. So
yeah,
that's where we ran into problems with Fate.
Being able to stack +2s is a big problem with that system, and I'm totally getting rid of that.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because that's a problem. Every time I played it,
right there.
Every time I played it, the aspect fishing, and then it's like, oh, hey, the mechanic just managed to do brain surgery. Isn't that amazing? It's just like a car.
That's fun. Yeah, I mean, brains are like an engine. Right?
Yeah.
You got your
pistons and your...
Jolene in the chat room said, I used to love Fate, but now every combat is the same to me, and there's only one right way to do combat as a player.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yell the vampire to death, because they have a lot lower charisma or whatever defense than they do social defense than they do physical defense. So you just demoralize them and then tell them to go out in the sun.
Call them names
and they are taken out.
That's not fair. That only happened like 4 or 5 times.
Hey, listen, it's not my fault that the game is built a certain way.
Well, and that is the problem with a poorly constructed game when you're relying on it to be game-y, is that, if there is one good way to do it and 12 harder ways to do it, nobody is going to... I just picked up Skyrim again, and I had to patch the hell out of it because there are so many, like, things that I found where you can kind of game the system and, like, have a 2 billion damage sword. So I had to patch all of that, or else just my brain is going to want to do it. I want to actually play the game, as opposed to, not.
Right.
I feel you. Yeah, whenever I know there's an exploit, it's hard to just play the game. Because, I mean, there's a right way to solve this problem.
Exactly.
All
and
right.
so it's an interesting design problem, I think, because you really have to pay attention to kind of the mouthfeel of the game and how to get people's interest in certain things as opposed to waiting around for their turn. And what options you have, etc., while not giving so many mechanics or so many dice rolls or so many different types of dice rolls that it
Another game, so this is a board game, but have you played Gloomhaven or heard anything about Gloomhaven?
I have heard about Gloomhaven. I haven't played it.
So I'm not going to advocate that anyone goes and steals it, but what I will say is if you own the box, it's available on Tabletop Simulator, and you're allowed a digital copy of things you own. So you could definitely play it on Tabletop Sim just to check it out. It's got some really interesting mechanics where you have you have a hand of cards and actions on the top and bottom of the cards, and you have to play 2 cards and pick a top and a bottom. It's got a really good fantasy RPG, old school fantasy RPG feel without really any of the in-character stuff, which is one of the other things that sort of popped in my head, that it's outside of that tabletop game realm, but the way that you're described wanting to play it feels like the way that we play Gloomhaven.
That is not an inexpensive game.
It is a very expensive game.
We had a friend back the Kickstarter, so we didn't actually buy it.
Yeah.
We own it adjacent.
It's not as bad as, what is it, Kingdom Death? That's like 120 or
also
1200. That's an expensive game.
We also own that adjacent as a friend.
Another group member.
So we played it. But
is it good?
It's hard. It's hardcore. It's so mean. That game is so mean. I died. I was so mad because weird little things will happen to your character, and I can't help but latch on to characters. I'm like, oh, this guy's so cool. He's got this weird thing, and oh yeah, I'm like this broken person, and I'm going out there, and then I just immediately die after like 30 minutes of being like, I'm gonna be the best.
But the main mechanic of that game is that you are the village, not the people.
I know, but I can't not be attached to my stupid little dude. I can't play Kingdom Death. I don't have it in me. I get attached too easy.
I had a character whose whole body just turned into like the bone person, and then like was amazing for a whole game, and then just died.
Yeah.
Like that game is hardcore. It's get wrecked. It's hard.
Yeah, Kingdom Death is no joke. And the visuals on it are just out there. Have you seen some of the miniatures that...
I have.
One of the first bosses it's sort of an elk, but the whole undercarriage is open, and its rib cage is teeth, and it just eats you. Its power is it just runs you over and eats you.
This is
from its
100%.
Open rib cage mouth.
This is 100% the kind of villain that I would have in a game.
Oh, it's so gross.
Things that are so disturbing, I love that.
It is very disturbing.
The phoenix is made of hands. Its wings are hands. Just hands. A bunch of hands.
Yeah, Kingdom Death is alive.
Sorry, going off on Kingdom Death there.
But back to Tappy's point of playing a role-playing game where you just engage with the mechanics and you don't role-play. I think the reason why Kurt and I are both very apprehensive about this topic is in our role-playing group, we tend to be the only two that role-play.
So I want to do a quick point of order. Is that you're still role-playing when you're saying what your character does.
Right.
As opposed to improv and talking.
Improving. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I would call that narration.
Friends,
more what?
I'm sorry. I would call that narration, but go ahead, finish your point, Kate.
Yes. So our group of friends tend to already narrate their actions more than improv with each other, and they'll say like my character does or I do this rather than talk to each other or talk to NPCs unless forced to.
Right.
And Kurt and I are the ones that typically engage in more of the improvisation and are the ones that are like, come on guys, talk to us. And so I think that's why, at least for me, that's part of my apprehension of going like, yes, I can see where this could potentially be fun. However, I can also tell you that there have been many games where I was bored off my ass.
Well, and see, that's the thing, is you have to, like, actually have a system that is designed to make it so people are not bored.
Right.
Right? And we don't have that. And when people are like, we have a situation where, like, if you're not actually, like, improvising and acting and interacting with other people, it is just, you know, going down the line of what's happening.
Right.
And you need to have some way of having like different things to do or making decisions, etc. That isn't just you know, either just following whatever story the GM has for you, or just like, well,
Like,
I go
5th
into the
edition,
store and when I get stuff.
Yeah.
Can I?
All right.
5th edition, not great for this kind of experiment, but Fate might be.
Well, because also I think 5th edition gets out of your way a lot when you're not in combat, and
Right.
the gaminess is in combat. And
Right.
if something like this works, it would be something where the gaminess is outside of combat.
Mm-hmm.
You need systems
Right.
that have like downtime actions or things that you do when you're not in combat, things that are keeping you still engaged, things that are
It's-
still interesting.
It's a very interesting concept because, like, the whole idea of can you make that fun? Because I mean, I've been in games too where it's like D&D and everybody just saying my character does this.
Right.
But I feel like it should be possible.
Well, it seems like I'm going to kind of rephrase what I think you're saying, is that you want to make a game where the game itself is fun enough that you don't need role-playing to make the game entertaining.
Yes.
Because that's what you get with a lot of very, very modern games, is they're extremely rules light to the point where the fun is the role-playing. It's not
The friends we make along the way.
It's the friends we make along the way. And that's interesting. That's also a very daunting task.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we've and a lot of us who run games or whatever have forgotten that that the game part is also supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why do it?
Right.
And that's why we've gone this so far to the side, because the answer is let's not.
Right.
And so maybe that's something that we can think about, even just when we're playing other systems, of like, how can I make the system more fun, or how can I use the mouthfeel of the system to make using it more fun, as opposed to just throwing it out and not using it.
A suggestion I would make to put in as a component for your game is a press your luck mechanic that always creates interest. Because have you ever played Zombie Dice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Love that
extremely
game.
simple, very elegant game, but boy, you get a group of people around a table playing it, and everyone's like, "Oh no!" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like something
I
about
still want to make a pass the pigs game.
Pass the pigs. Oh, I mean, like
the little
the card game?
No, you
The
roll
little
little
pigs.
pigs.
Oh, and they stack on each other?
It's over there. Yeah, and the way they land depends on how many points you get. It's Zombie Dice but with pigs.
I'm pretty sure those are
And if you get a certain configuration of the way the pig statues land, then you lose your points. It's an old game.
They're great.
Yeah, no,
I
I played that before.
They're great to carry with you when you're gonna like be in a car and be stopping at Greasy Spoons along the way, and
Yeah.
back when you went places and did things
Madness in the before times.
before times.
Yes. Restaurants, you say? What to you?
Oh, those are the
Yeah,
restaurants. I remember those. Those are those big things that are covered with plywood.
Yeah.
Yahtzee. There's another one, right? There's a dice rolling mechanic.
Right.
That people just rolled fucking dice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was a popular enough game
Farkle.
that, what's that?
Farkle.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So can we use these concepts to just kind of inform interesting and new stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think that a game where there is no role playing is the answer. I don't want to make that game, but I want to try it to just kind of see how I, as a game master, and how a system can be stress tested in that way,
Yeah.
and not be deadly dull.
I still
and then have
think
all
that.
your friends add role playing back into it.
Right. that might actually happen.
Of course, yeah, probably will. That's why I really want to get a group of role players together and play diplomacy.
I want to do that so bad.
It would be so much fun. And we are not amused. I want to play Queen Victoria.
I think you might be able to look at dating sims too as ways to build mechanics around social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like things like Monster Prom and all those kind of games where you are trying to say the right thing. It would require the only problem with that is you require a right answer.
Yeah. Social mechanics are one of the more difficult things to do in any game. And I personally think that the proper way to do persuasion is just try and figure out how much that person likes you. And the persuasion is getting them to like you, not saying the thing that convinces them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
Because that whole goes back to bias, etc. If you can make a good first impression, then that informs everything else.
Yeah.
But there are also certain things you can't fast talking yourself past a guard. That doesn't. Fast talking is usually a confidence thing that somebody has. Again, this initial thing, but you build trust with that person.
Right.
So you if you don't have a pass, you're not getting past that guard.
Or you find a Mark who's really, really, really dumb.
Right. But that's a mark, not a guard. Even.
Right.
It's really hard to tell a guard, no, I really do belong here. Even a dumb guard.
No, I don't have a badge. Yeah, it's at home.
It's at home.
Let me in anyway. Yeah, believe me, I used to work at McDonnell Douglas, and I had a security badge, and I can't tell you how many times I had to fucking drive home, even though they all recognized me, and I knew a couple of them by name.
Sorry, Mr. V, you're gonna have to go get that badge. It's policy.
Right.
Yeah. Nobody wants to get in trouble.
No,
Yep.
no, or lose their
Get in
job.
trouble. People
Sorry,
follow
ain't worth the
orders real
drama.
well, and they're not going to follow your orders.
Nope.
Unless they really like you for some reason.
Right.
But yeah. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to try.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, at the very least, if it fails miserably, at least I'll get a little more information on this, because I don't know anybody who has specifically tried to do a thing like this.
Right.
Where the game itself is so fun that even if you don't roleplay, you still can, or act, etc. It's still a good time.
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
interesting.
if you're looking for
interesting.
playtesters.
Yeah. I will totally.
I am not going to do this game on a stream. the game that is most likely that I've ever run to fail, including the first game I ever ran.
My character looks at him suspiciously. All right. I'm gonna one more time, Kurt. What's the URL for people who want to go to get the Kickstarter for Lighthearted?
Yeah, go to lighthearted.games. Grab your Lighthearted, a magical 80s RPG.
Excellent.
Yes, the Kickstarter goes live on Tuesday the 26th.
Tuesday. And you guys will be back not next week, but the week after, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
And we run for a month, so we'll be back during the Kickstarter. Sometime.
Excellent. All righty. Where's my... Uh-oh. Let's see. Oh, there it is.
Well,
Thank you for joining us for Season 28, Episode 2 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
I'm Kate.
And I've been Kurt.
And thank you very much, and we'll see you next week at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, happyjacks.org/live, or watch us wherever you get your podcasts, or listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can see us on the YouTubes as well. And that's it, and stay safe, and we'll see you in a week. Thank you very much.
Make when you no problem have you don't want to make.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire. Bum, 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 bum.
No, Johnny, these men are nihilists. There's nothing to be afraid of.